Good morning, everyone. My name is Judy Blake, and I am the Leadership and Advocacy Coordinator for Family to Family Network in Houston, Texas. Thank you for joining us today. We have an incredible speaker who will be presented in just a few moments. This is the fourth out of 5 sessions. It has been a joy to work with Hazel. Wave your hand, Hazel. There's Hazel. So it's been a wonderful collaboration between Family to Family Network and the Lone Star Lend program. I want to thank you all for joining us on a Saturday, and especially when we know you could be doing other things. So Hazel, it's all yours.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, so thank you everyone for making the time to come on a Saturday morning for our fourth talk. Especially, I know I see some of you who have been here for multiple Saturdays, and it's really heartwarming to see, and I hope this has been beneficial for everybody. So this talk will be recorded for documentation purposes. We have been translating the notes. I know for some of you who have been here, the notes have been taking a long time to go out. Generally, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks. And so we appreciate your patience, and we'll send them out as soon as we're ready. So if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat. And if appropriate, you can raise your hand and see whether Dr. Montfort will be able to take those questions. We are taking questions in the middle this time. So definitely lay your questions out. We are more than happy to answer them. If you're not comfortable with sharing your questions, you can also private message Judy or me anonymously, and we can get to your questions. If we are not able to get to all of your questions by the end, we will try to provide answers after the talk as well. So now just let me introduce Dr. Natalie Montfort. She is a clinical psychologist, and she obtained licensure in 2016 and launched Montfort Psychology Associates in 2020. She has worked with children and young adults with ASD since 2002 and have training in cognitive behavioral therapy with children, adolescents, and adults. She's also done trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, relationship development interventions, social thinking, behavioral modification, and educational assessments, a whole bunch of things. So her areas of interest include assessment of children, adolescents, and adults, cognitive and behavioral differences in children with neurodevelopmental disorders, treatment of adoption-related issues, treatment of childhood trauma, and also animal-assisted therapy. So now I'm going to pass the time to Dr. Montfort, and she's going to go more into detail about herself and, of course, take you away on her wonderful talk.
Thank you, Hazel. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning. I am happy that you're here. I know what it takes to get people here on a Saturday. You have kids at home and things to do, and we're glad that you're taking this time with us, either in person or if you're watching after the fact, and hope to give you some great tips and pointers to help get you started or continue you in the right direction when it comes to school. Like Hazel said, I'm a clinical psychologist. So what that means is I've gathered lots of experiences from lots of families who've attended lots of schools. And many of the tips and tricks and recommendations and things that I have for you, I've also learned from other families. So we're gonna kind of pay it forward and share some of these strategies with you today, and hopefully demystify what it means to mainstream or include a young person, a school-age person with a disability. All right. So if it is helpful to you all, if you want to just type in the chat who you are here representing or thinking about today, what age your loved one is, and we'll be sure to kind of include some information that captures everybody's needs. Now, if we are talking about something that you wonder how might apply to your child or family, or you have a question specific about that topic, like Hazel said, please jump in today. Type it in the chat or send it anonymously to Judy or Hazel, and we'll take care of that question for you. If you want to save your question to the end because you have bigger, more general questions, feel free to do so, because we'll also talk with you at the end. And I'll put my email address in the chat. So if you have any questions that we don't address today or you're not comfortable addressing today, feel free to reach out and email me. All right, if I don't know, probably one of these ladies here does. And if not, between us, we'll get you pointed in the right direction. All right, so let me share this screen so that we can show the PowerPoint together. Give me just a second to, let's see, I'm going to share a portion of the screen. I think I have to do that separately. There we go. Okay, now we got it. All right, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about
Natalie,
what.
It's
Yes.
it's so big. There we go. Now you got it. Okay.
Did it
thanks.
work? Okay.
Yeah, now it's good.
All right. So I learned that if you share a portion of the screen, you can still see all your presenter notes. And I just learned this trick. You'd think a year into COVID, but I'm catching up. So we'll talk a little bit about mainstreaming today. And what we mean by that is, inclusion, education that is with or alongside typically developing children in public, private, or home settings. So those are really our three options, right? We've got the public schools that we'll talk about. We'll touch on the private schools, and then we won't talk about home or online school options because there's really not a lot to say about mainstreaming in the homeschooling arena. You do school and you find activities and keep your child socially engaged in other ways. But today we're going to be talking about the public and the private school options primarily. So I know that many of you are here, wanting to know what is the big answer to this question. How do I mainstream my child? And, what does that take? So the drum roll, what does it take to mainstream? Surprisingly, it's absolutely nothing. So let's dive into that a little bit. We're going to begin by talking about the public education system. So the public school system is required to provide a free and appropriate public education to all children. And I feel like this is important for us as professionals to spread this word, because there are families who aren't aware of this. Recently I had a family that had a 5-year-old child, and he was pre-verbal. So he was, mostly using pointing and gestures and grunting and vocalizations to get his needs met. And when I assessed him, his parents said they had withheld him from kindergarten because they didn't feel he was ready for school. They wanted to give him another year to be ready for school. They were afraid he would be kicked out because of his lack of skills. This family had moved from out of the country, and they weren't aware that here in the United States, every child is entitled to a free and appropriate education. So in reality, their child could have been taking part in the education system beginning at the age of 3 years old. So children with disabilities are invited to take part in the public education system beginning at the age of 3. And that means that they are provided, we're going to break this down, but free, right? So at no cost to the parents, appropriate public education. And that means that they cannot discriminate based on disability or skill status. So I've got a picture of the Tasmanian devil down here because I frequently hear from parents, oh, but how will they handle my child? Could they take a child like mine? They can, they really can. And I find sometimes, the public school system, you need to check it out. You need to start with your local school and not to worry if your local school does not have the appropriate setting for your child's needs. The school district will bus at no cost to you, will bus your child to the campus that does have the appropriate setting. You know, if the school district itself does not have the appropriate setting, they will find or make the appropriate setting for your child. So this is really important information for everyone to know. So this is the technical language about the free and appropriate public education, okay? So it includes preschool, elementary, and high school education in the state where the individual lives, all right? And the services are going to be provided according to the individual education program. So that means for every child with a disability, the education that they receive is going to be geared toward their specific needs. So this could be a great options for families to take advantage of. But let's break it down. What does free really mean? So it is indeed, no cost up front, but is it easy? Not always. Sometimes you need the help of others. Sometimes we have to educate ourselves, work with advocates, attend meetings at the school, and it can be stressful. It can be stressful to worry that your child isn't getting what he or she needs, or to go through a period of time where, something is being tried that maybe you're not excited about. It can be stressful. Things can happen at school, bullying, teasing, not having a easy relationship with school staff. And does free mean successful? So it doesn't. And it is there something to you get what you pay for? Well, ask a lot of different parents and they may tell you different things. Full disclosure, all of my children are involved in the public school setting and have disabilities. So that said, I spent many years working in a private school setting. And one of my sons did a few years in private school and many years in public school. So do you get what you pay for? I'm not sure that's always true. But is it without cost? Not necessarily. So sometimes to take advantage of the free appropriate education, we may need to do things like pay for tutoring or pay for extracurricular activities, for our child to participate in some of those, or even pay for an educational advocate, although there are educational advocates available also at no cost, and we'll talk about that. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about appropriate. So you see we've got this skateboard and this Cadillac. Both get you from point A to point B. And that's what the word appropriate means. So we take you from where you are to meeting this objective, this goal that we have set for you. Now, there's lots of ways to do that. Okay, and although a Cadillac would be nice, that's not appropriate. Appropriate means we're just going to help you get there. So a skateboard will do. That said, there are lots of different kinds of skateboards. All right, so what I mean by that is that there are lots of different programs and qualities of programs out there. So it's important to just make sure that your child is receiving an appropriate education for his or her needs. All right, now today we are based here in Texas. So we're going to be talking a lot about the Texas system, as well as IDEA, which is at the federal level that says students with disabilities are entitled to a free and appropriate education. So in the public school system, there are a couple of options for support. If your child enters the public school system at kindergarten without an educational eligibility, meaning they have not yet been found to have a disability condition that requires extra services, they'll join into the general education classroom like every other child. If they struggle in that environment, there are a few things that might happen. Excuse me. One is called response to intervention. And response to intervention is a program that was designed to keep children out of special education when they didn't belong there. So response to intervention is an important and meaningful piece of the process. And I think it's important for us to talk just a little bit about how it came to be. Part of why response to intervention came to be had to do with disparity. So they were finding that there were a disproportionate number of African-American boys in special education. And in order to keep from sending African-American boys unnecessarily into special education, response to intervention was developed. So response to intervention is very important because it will keep children out of special education when they don't really belong there. Let's say they're English language learners, or they didn't attend a preschool program like the rest of their classmates. Response to intervention can help their lagging skills, catch up and not label them or place them in special education unnecessarily. So this is a great program. However, one of the consequences of response to intervention is that sometimes children who need more support get stuck in response to intervention. It doesn't really have a time limit, but it helps with data-based decision-making. And a child who kind of improves in response to intervention may stay in the program. Then maybe they are dismissed, but they fall behind again. So they get back in response to intervention, RTI, they improve again, they fall behind when they're taken out. And you can get this cycle that can last for years when a child really needs a greater level of support. So if that's happening to your child, now you know that we're just going to ask for the next level. All right, so section 504, and you see I've included this little symbol here. It means section. And when we put it in talking to the school, it helps them kind of think we know what we're talking about. So section 504 is support for a difference that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Now, this can be physical or mental. And what we mean by that is this would be what allows your child to use the elevator if he or she had a broken leg. So section 504 can help provide support for a physical limitation. Now that can be permanent or it can be temporary. So it might be, a child who has to visit the nurse several times a day to manage diabetes. Permanent. It might be a child who needs to use the elevator because of a broken leg. Temporary. All right. And section 504, again, can be for physical or mental impairments. So let's talk about a mental impairment. That's the wording, that is provided to us. That could be something like an attention deficit disorder. That makes it difficult for a child to pay attention, to stay alert throughout the class period. Section 504 could also be for someone struggling with depression who has trouble making it to school every day. So they might have some attendance requirements changed for that child to accommodate their disability. And that's an important word. In section 504, we're just accommodating. That means we're not making changes to any of the required curriculum. We're just changing how it's presented, when it's presented. We're making it larger for a student that needs help with the visual aspect. We're, allowing the student to take more frequent breaks and do work the day after it's due in some cases, but we're not changing what we require of the student to learn. Okay, so the next level of support, if Section 504 support is not enough, is special education. And we're not going to get into it today. Special education is actually a subset of Section 504. But the important piece of special education is that this is a service, not a place. So special education is not, a room where those children go. Special education can happen in the general ed classroom. And in fact, I told you that my children are in the public school system with special education support. So they attend the general education class and have some extra support for their needs. Okay. Now, there are classrooms that are what we call self-contained for children who need that level of support. So, and that decision is not typically made lightly. To remove a child from the general education takes discussion and planning, and the whole team has to be on board with that. Right. So, I have one son that receives some of his programming in a classroom that's not the general education classroom. So when it comes to that subject area where his need is great, he leaves the general education and goes to a different setting for that instruction. When that class period's over, he goes back and he's with the general education. He takes band and PE and science and social studies and all of those other subjects with the general education group. So lots of exposure to typically developing peers we hope, is occurring in the special education setting or with those services. One that we already talked about is the preschool program for children with disabilities. And this is such a beneficial program for families to take advantage of if it's appropriate for their child. So this is a program that begins at age 3. So after early childhood intervention ends, for those families who know that their child has a disability from a younger age. Now, not all of us know that, all right? So if you did not go through early childhood intervention with your child, if your child did not go through the preschool program for children with disabilities, that's okay. Not all children's disabilities manifest at that young age or require or qualify for this level of support, right? So there are sometimes when a child may have a difference, but they don't receive these services. And then there are many times where families opt for other options. Okay. So the other things that can be provided by special education include therapies like speech therapy, occupational therapy, counseling. So if we have a need for that, they can also provide social skills training. They can provide assistive technology to help your student with writing or communication skills. They can provide transportation, specialized transportation. So if your student's program is not on his or her home campus, the bus will take them there. Even if the program is on the home campus, your child may need more support during the transportation, the ride to and from school. Maybe they're overwhelmed by the regular school bus. So they can take a bus with fewer children. Special education can also provide an extended school year for children who have trouble retaining what they've learned. Okay. And other programs that might be appropriate. So some of those could include nursing, skilled nursing services, a nursing plan, and a wide variety of other things to meet the needs of every individual child.
Natalie?
Yes, ma'am.
I just received a private message from a parent, and what you're saying is totally true, what they're supposed to provide, but the issue has been the school doesn't feel it's relevant to their needs, educationally relevant. And I remember hearing that 20 years ago with my son.
Yes.
And so, you know, we all know what they should do, the speech, the OT, the assistive technology, but the reality is it's like you're having to fight for it.
Yes. And so that's kind of where we talked about in that free piece that, you know, yes, it's free. Yes, it's supposed to be there, but it may not be stress-free and it may not be easy. And you may even have to incur a cost with an educational advocate or a cost to your time, you know, being at these meetings, even if, you know, if you have an advocate that is also free. I do recommend educational advocates. You know, it's hard in the parent role to tell the school when they're wrong. Now, we can do that, right? Because it's for our children. So sometimes we even speak up, but it's like we need a third person, you know, a mediator who knows school law, who knows what the public school can offer, and who gets to know your child, your family, his or her needs, so that they can help pave that path. So if you need any help with educational advocacy, you know, reach out to us. Judy has a wealth of resources that she can point you towards. Even though I'm here today talking to you guys about these things, I have helped advocate for families in the past. And when I call as Dr. Montfort, you know, I can get mountains moved for other people's children. It is different when we're in the parent role in the ARD meeting. So in the school meetings where they're making these decisions, when I say something as, you know, my child's mother, it's taken very differently than when I say something as a professional opinion for someone else's child. So even I use an educational advocate just to review the paperwork, to review everything, to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing. We've explored all the options for this young person's needs. So advocates do not have to mean, you know, a negative relationship with the school. Talk to the advocates, get to know them, you know, get their style, how they might work with schools. Let them know, you know, it's important to me to maintain a good relationship with the school. That's important to me too. You know, I don't want my child to pull up to school and they go, oh no, he's here. You know, I want them to enjoy him, enjoy us, and that we work together on what's best for his needs. So of course, that's the plan, right? That's what we always go in hoping. But sometimes you do need an advocate to know what's available and to fight for that for your child. I really genuinely believe that the public school educators are overworked, you know, they're understaffed, they're underfunded. And if they had the resources to provide everything for everyone's children, I think they would. I have not met an educator who would withhold it just for fun. But they have limitations, just like any other situation. And also, you know, they don't study school law. Their job is to run the school, to run the ARD meeting. They have so many things on their plate, so many things that they're responsible for doing. It's important to bring someone to your meetings whose job it is to study school law, to help remind all of us what's available. So we can point you in the right direction. And sometimes that first step is proving that the child has a need, right? So we address the school is not going to give everyone these special education supports. We have to prove there's a need. And so you'll have an evaluation through the school, and that's where the school will determine two things. One, does the child meet eligibility for a disability condition? And two, is there a need for special education services, right? So I could have theoretically a disability condition and not have a need for special education services. In my clinical opinion, that would be rare, but theoretically it could happen. Now there is recourse if you disagree with the evaluation of your child. And this is where an educational advocate will be so helpful because they know all of these things, right? As a parent, you aren't expected to know all of these things, but your advocate will know this, that if we are not in agreement with the evaluation, we tell the school, we disagree. You know, I think that my child does have autism. These doctors have said so, and that there is an educational need. What happens next is you get an independent educational evaluation. That means you pick a provider in the community that the school approves and pays for a second opinion. So when you work with an educational advocate, they will know all of these things, right? And they will help inform you about what your next steps are. So you can always keep asking, we can always keep trying. And if we don't have a need for special education this year, maybe we will next year. You know, maybe we will, and I have seen that happen sometimes where a young child, particularly with low support needs, is told they don't meet eligibility criteria, they don't have a need yet. But then maybe as the social and academic demands begin increasing, that student isn't able to keep up. So just because your student doesn't have a need early in their educational career doesn't mean that it might not be more pronounced later. So you can actually have another evaluation. And if special education isn't the tier that your child or your student qualifies for, perhaps they can get Section 504 supports for their outside diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, for autism, for anxiety. So just because special education isn't the right level of support doesn't necessarily mean no support. You know, there are also other programs offered in the school system, like communities in schools, where, you know, students can get preventative services or counseling, mental health related services to help them, you know, avoid a need for special education. So there's a lot to offer, and taking advantage of an educational advocate, groups like these, you know, talking to other parents are great ways to learn about how to access that support. All right, so the purpose of special education. Let's just touch on this briefly. And again, this is the legal terminology, but the important thing for you to notice is what's underlined here. The purpose of special education is to prepare students for three things: further education, employment, and independent living. And if your child receives special education support, all of their goals need to be aimed, their objectives in their IEP are going to be aimed at these things. So that's the big picture. And really, that's the big picture for all of our students and children, isn't it? Further education, employment, and independent living. So special education has the same goals for outcome that we have of all children. Right now, we're going to have to, just like with all children, we're going to have to tailor that to the child's needs. You know, I have a 19-year-old living at home, still is not quite ready to launch for independent living. Further education may look different between two children, and employment may look different between two children as far as what we're aiming for. Now, this is where I find many families get stuck. So I'm going to give you the secret today. The federal law for special education has 13 terms to define a child with a disability. That means that they take all of the conditions in the medical literature, in the psychological literature, and they condense it into these 13 categories. So if your child has Down syndrome, you'll notice that is not on our list here of educational eligibilities. So a student with Down syndrome would have the educational eligibility, probably, of intellectual disability. They may or may not also have the educational eligibility of speech impairment. Okay, so when you look at this list, this is how we determine which students receive services. Only the students who meet criteria for a condition on this list. And guess what? They wrote the criteria too. So the criteria are a little bit different than our clinical diagnoses. All right. Now, as a clinical psychologist, it's important for me to know that. But there are many people, medical doctors or psychologists, who aren't aware that a diagnosis is not the same thing as an eligibility. Okay, so it sounds like a trick of the language, and it almost is. So what I mean by this is I might see a student who is underachieving in reading. And I might see that that student has tried tutoring, they've been in good schools. There's no other reason that explains their lack of reading progress. And I, as a provider, diagnose that student with a specific learning disability. Now, in my book, specific learning disability is described a certain way. And it's a little bit different than the book used by the public education system to describe specific learning disability. So this is how a child might come to have a diagnosis, but not have an eligibility for special education. And remember, it's not just the label that's important, they also have to have a need. So they have to demonstrate that they need the services. So that usually means that they're failing in some way. Not always, but that's an indicator that the school often waits for, unfortunately. So, again, the free and appropriate education is not without stressors. Okay, so you look here at this list, and these are the areas that we can ask for our students to be tested. Another area I've seen families run into problems is that they've asked for testing in one area, but the child's disability actually lies in another area. So for example, I had a family asking for testing from the school district for intellectual disability because their student had failed the first grade and been retained and was currently failing the first grade again. And they were concerned that perhaps their child had a difference in cognitive and intellectual functioning that made passing the first grade hard. Well, that was not the case. The child was found to not have the eligibility of intellectual disability. They asked for a second opinion. That second opinion came to me, and I recognized, okay, this child does not have an intellectual disability, but this child has an other health impairment, a severe problem with attention that was preventing the child from learning the material that was being taught in class. So sometimes it is just in the right ask, and your advocate will help you with that, right? There are some great resources available. The guidebook for IDEA, maybe we can post that link with this presentation, or that kind of walks you through all of the steps in the process. It'll have sample letters that you can use. Just copy them, add your child's name to make sure that when your child is assessed, he or she is assessed in all of the areas that might apply. So one way that parents are sort of kept out of the process unintentionally is through the vocabulary that's in use in public schools. To the educators in public schools, the vocabulary, it becomes second nature. They're so used to hearing it and talking about it that sometimes they forget to stop meetings and define it for us. So don't be afraid when you're in these meetings to, raise your hand and say, what does that mean? Or can you tell me what that means? Because there are also a lot of acronyms for these vocabulary terms that take a lot of time to become familiar with, and that's okay. The other thing I've noticed is that different school districts may use different vocabulary to mean the same thing. So it's, for example, this ARD meeting is sometimes called an IEP meeting. And the IEP, the individualized education program or plan, sometimes differs from district to district. So don't be afraid to ask, because everybody is asking, right? They talk fast, they use a lot of words that we may not be familiar with as outsiders to the school system. Now, they are supposed to slow down and define things for you, but sometimes they forget. All right. And I've seen some good lists on some of the resource websites I'm going to share with you that tell you what all the vocabulary means. So as we've talked about, tips for public school: have an advocate. And you'll see that's on my list twice. That's not an accident because it's that important. And always make sure your child is wanted, not just tolerated. Sometimes as parents, we have to help with that. So, send notes of appreciation, send emails thanking specific people at the school, calling them out for helping your child. Send and express that kind of positivity that you want your child to receive. Even if you have a child who has very difficult behavior or intense needs, if I find that if we are open and thankful and appreciative of what the school is doing, it helps people be eager to work with our children. So, you want to think about when your child goes from 3rd grade to 4th grade, you want to think about creating a situation where the staff members are, oh, no, I want him. No, I want him in my class. No, I really want a chance to work with him, because your communication with the school is going to be, positive and timely and also open and forthcoming. So, be honest about your child's need for support when you go into this process. Tell the school what the worst day looks like. Let them know, when he is overwhelmed, he may bite, hit, or run away. Remember at the beginning, the Tasmanian devil, the public school cannot turn you away. So don't be afraid to tell them what they need to expect and prepare for. It's a safety issue, right? They need to prepare for these behaviors. They need to prepare for the worst day. And be involved with the school. When COVID allows, volunteer, show your face. Sometimes, like myself, I can't do that during the day when I'm working. So find ways to, for teacher appreciation, make or send things. Put your name and your child's name all over it. So I'll send the salad dressing and write in a permanent marker on it who it's from, so that teachers see and know our name, right? Give gifts or cards on Teacher Appreciation Day and thoughtful, homemade treats, even an email thanking the school staff, that they can post in the lounge or that you can go post in the staff lounge, can go a long way. So these don't have to be monetary items. And then think about the long-term plans and goals that you have for your child. Is your child college bound? If you're not sure, ask the school. Start talking open and early. If your child continues on the current trajectory, will he or she attend college? Do they have the daily living skills that they need to live as independently as possible? Maybe your child is bright and academically capable, but can't wash his or her hair in elementary school. Has trouble doing laundry or knowing when to wear clean clothes. So those are things to communicate with the school because they can help you with those home skills as well. And here are some resources for public school. All right, so this is the IDEA guidebook that I was mentioning from the ARC of Texas. This is a great resource that'll walk you through the process. Rights Law also has some excellent information. And the ARC of Greater Houston can help link you with advocacy. Okay. The Texas Education Agency is listed here, who's in charge of all of public education in Texas. And then this one, the Office of Civil Rights. If you feel your child's rights have been violated, that your child is not receiving a free and appropriate education, this is where you can make a complaint. And I find that sometimes if you're having a really difficult time with the school, your advocate may suggest that you ask the school, to provide for your child, or we may talk to the Office of Civil Rights. That's often just kind of name dropping that is enough to really get things moving in the right direction and make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed in your child's case. All right, so we're going to talk briefly today about private schools because there really isn't as much to say. But when it comes to private schools, discrimination is something that can happen. Where the public school has to take all children, private schools do not. So they could have a rule that says we don't take children with disabilities. We don't take children with academic needs. We don't take children with behavioral needs, right? So that's something that you could find in a private mainstream school. Now, a private school is a school that you're going to need to pay a tuition for, right? This is not a state-funded school. So they are not obligated to serve your child. There is no skateboard from A to B. They're also not obligated to keep your child. So one thing that happens when the economy is poor, sometimes we see mainstream private schools open their doors to children with disabilities when their enrollment is low. Then when enrollment starts to get high again, they may ask some of those students to leave. They may also be trying their new program on your child. So there's not necessarily accountability. They may not have any academic remediation programs that are based in research that the public school would have. And there's no obligation to keep outcome data or to measure outcome. So when it comes to mainstream private schools, if you have a student with a disability, you may be better served in a public school setting. There are also private schools for students with special needs. All right, so you could attend a private school that is not mainstream. And there's a whole host of those in the Houston area that you can find out more about on a website called the Special Schools Coalition website, the sschouston.org. There are also some private schools that are what I call closet special schools. So they will take students with a wide variety of needs, even though they purport to be a mainstream setting. When you're looking at private school options for your student with a disability, you need to make sure that your student does not exceed the level of support provided. Okay, so that would be a detriment to your child. For example, if your child has a learning disability and the school does not have a curriculum or a teacher to support a student with a learning disability, your child could fall farther and farther behind in math or reading, the subject area where they have a disability. If your child has behavioral needs and the school has no support for behavioral needs, this is going to be a problem. So what we're quickly going to get into is that your child may be tolerated, but not wanted. Your child may not be wanted. And we never want to get into a situation where the child is unsafe. So be sure that you know the ins and outs of the school, what they can and can't handle. And if you're headed for a private school that's mainstream with your student with a disability, you really want to over prepare your child for that setting, right? So sometimes these schools are costly. And if something were to happen, you may not be refunded. Read your enrollment contract, talk about what happens if it's not a fit for my child. I recommend families are open and honest from the beginning and disclose their child's disability. I recognize that that's different for every family. And I have worked with some families who attend private religious schools where their child would not be welcome if they disclosed a disability. So just think of all the possibilities and be very aware of how things could go. Consider your child's long-term plan. And I recommend that the school offer a diploma. And this sounds silly, like a given, but if your child attends a public school, even if he or she is in a self-contained classroom and never spends a single day with the general ed, they will be awarded a high school diploma based on their unique educational goals. In a private school, that's not always the case. And it's very important for your student to have a high school diploma for employment purposes. Okay. So when you're thinking about how do I know if my child is ready, public school, everybody's ready. And if you're here representing or thinking about a young child, 3 years old or older, contact the public school because your child may qualify for the preschool programs. For private school, we need to consider all levels of their functioning. One way to do that is from some testing. Other ways are just through the information that you're getting from their current teacher. But it's important to monitor, is your child in a good fit classroom? So you can have a school that is poorly rated and your child can excel with a good teacher and a good classroom and a good fit. You can also have a highly rated school where your child is not thriving. They start to have behavioral problems. They have reduced self-esteem. So these are some of the signs that something needs to change. Bullying, they're losing skills. We need to talk to the school and make a change so that we can get to this good fit, right? The appropriate classroom. And to do that, we want to stay involved with the school, whether it's public or private. Act early, meet often. When it's not COVID, see if there's ways you can observe. Sometimes they won't let you observe, but they will let you volunteer. So come up, volunteer, read a story. I've had parents come in and teach about religious holidays or teach about, cultural competence or do a craft or come for a holiday party. So there's ways that you can get inside the school and see how your child is doing. Talk to teachers, talk to therapists on your child's treatment team and see about collaboration. All right, and don't hesitate to bring in an advocate when you need. If you're in a private school, don't hesitate to bring in professional help. An advocate's not going to be the best help in a private school, but you may need a psychologist or a behavior therapist to come in and do a school observation and make some recommendations. I've done that many times for families with a student in private school. Don't hesitate to make a change. If you see that your child is struggling, socially, emotionally, with their confidence, they're not feeling capable, that's when it's time to talk to the school to make a change, make a temporary change where you step back and then try to kind of restart things, or a more permanent change, like a different school, a different tier of support, or a different classroom. So talk to people about what the options might be. And lastly, generally when it comes to picking a school for your child, how do you know which is best? Like I said, there are some great public schools that may not be the best fit for your child's needs. There are also some very poorly rated public schools that can be great fits. So I recommend kind of being open to all settings. Go ahead and explore those settings, regardless of cost, regardless of distance, or what you think they might be. You could learn something from a program, even if your child doesn't end up going there. Things can be worked out. Some private schools have financial aid options. Sometimes you may find a school that's at a distance and lo and behold, there's a carpool program or another family in your area. So check everything out because it could all be a source of learning and knowledge. I also recommend families create what I call a one-pager. So this is just one piece of paper with your child's picture that talks about your child, tells about your child, their likes, their dislikes, what works, what doesn't work, that you can give to all teachers or staff working with your child. I think this is probably a good idea even for typically developing children, because teachers have so many kids, you can kind of shortcut their getting to know them. And then, review your goals for your child periodically. What are what you're working on this year may not be what you're working on next year. What your 5-year plan is not going to be the same as your 10-year plan. So keep reviewing those goals. And most importantly, help your child to be wanted. Because when your child is wanted, you generally have staff with hearts in the right place, doing the best that they can for your child. And that just makes their day so much easier. So if you have any questions, we can talk about those now. You also have the resource list and my email. Does anybody have any questions?
So yes, someone had private messaged me. And I know that this is a little bit, and by the way, thank you. That was wonderful, your presentation.
Thank you.
Let me find it here. So a parent wrote, and I realize this may not exactly be your area of expertise, but you're a smart gal, so I'm not worried. 20 years old, her son has autism, ADHD, intellectual disabilities, obsessive compulsive disorder, and a significant speech impairment. He also has sensory issues. And he also has pandas. He walked in his graduation in 2019, and he is out of school. Was definitely very challenging. Till 22, he will keep going to Goodwill for 4 hours a week with a job coach through Clear Creek Independent School District. They've been looking for suitable day programs. None so far is suitable because of his sensory needs. Most part of the year, him and I are together all the time, basically 24/7. He does some online social clubs. And it's just really hard because she fought very hard for so much, but he's still alone and it's unsettling. And
Yes.
this mom, I can totally relate to that.
It is unfortunately such a common experience. I think, Judy, right? When young people graduate from high school, their world changes. There was actually a documentary, I think, called Sounding the Alarm, that addresses this problem. And I think we're in a place now where people are well aware or becoming more aware of the problem, but we don't yet have great solutions on board. What I can tell you is you're not alone. Reach out to Family Network, perhaps the Autism Society. There are day programs available. It's excellent that your son is working and doing that through Clear Creek ISD. There may be more that he can receive at his age. If you mentioned 4 hours a day, so it could still be worth talking to an advocate who's familiar with Clear Creek ISD to know what else might be available to fill the day. I am familiar with some day programs. There's an excellent one in Conroe that you can email me and I'll send you. I can maybe even pull it up. There are some day programs, but just like schools, go see them, go tour. Would you be happy with your young person being there, spending time there? I agree. And at 20, I think with a couple of years left through the public school system, it might also be helpful to look if other employment or volunteer opportunities are an option for the remainder of the day. So thinking also about local organizations like a YMCA, where perhaps we could schedule more into the day. So 4 hours at Goodwill, a lunch break, 90 minutes at the YMCA, where we may have to go in and teach that. That sounds like some super objectives for the IEP that are community-based to help fill the day and help prepare him for greater independence after this post-secondary vocational training ends. So do reach out to those resources because you're not alone, and I think there may be more available. I'm going to look and see if I find the name of the.
And I'm happy to, if you want to email me next week and to share some of that information, because what makes me wonder is, so he walked with his class, the gentleman, and then so is he part of an 18+ program, which is why they're providing the job coach at Goodwill. And all through the ARD meetings, what was the goal? Was the goal any kind of post-secondary education? Was it employment?
Right.
I realize that it's great that he's working, and I really applaud that. But please reach out to me, Mom, next week to see what other information I can give you.
Yeah, let's see how we can fill that day.
Yeah.
It's also super that you've gotten involvement in some online groups. It's just so hard right now with things not meeting in person, but you're wise to keep that social piece in mind and keep him going.
And if it, not that, this helps your situation, but my son's been with me since COVID 24/7, and I hate it.
Yeah.
Because I want him out there working. So I completely get it. Hazel, we had a couple of more questions in the chat box, and I'm also going to post the survey again.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we do have another question. Can you recommend some of the good private schools for autistic children in the greater Houston area?
Yeah, so go to the sschouston.org. Depends on the age of the child, but there are many schools in Houston that work with children with autism. Special needs private schools would include like Westview, Monarch. Let's see. There's so many on the list these days, and it depends what kind of a program you're looking for too. If you're looking for kind of a mainstream, curriculum with support for students with autism, or more of a modified curriculum or therapeutic environment, there's a number of ABA clinics that will do full day programs and work on integrating.
Website special. I want to put it in
ssschouston.org.
Got it.
And this lists all of the special schools in Houston who are part of this organization. And usually just reaching out to one special school in Houston, they'll help you find the school that is the right fit if it's not theirs. And so those are options. But again, I have seen public programs that can be equally stellar. Some districts have a lot of students with autism, for example, and so they can have well-developed autism programs or classrooms that can rival that. So definitely it's not necessarily the choice for every family. There are many other options that are workable if it's not a private special needs school. So we don't want families to feel like that's the only avenue.
Thank you. There's another question. I realize you're located in the Houston area, but wanted to know if you in any way cover the Dallas area as well. If not, can you recommend a clinical psychologist here in Dallas?
So I think I do have some Dallas resources. Email me next week and I'll send you some Dallas resources. And the public school information still holds. But I can help you get some contacts in Dallas. And I'm sure Judy with Family to Family may have some as well. So we can put our heads together on that. Absolutely.
So Mary was the one who asked that question. And you saw Natalie's email address in the chat box. So definitely email her that.
I'm just going to paste your email again so that everyone sees it.
And there's some good resources for families wishing to, learn more. The Arc of Greater Houston, Family to Family has some great resources. You can even look, with everything being Zoom and online these days, there's also some educational videos for families by Special Education Boss, where you can learn more about the special education system. I'll put that up here too.
The special education system is one that's definitely not easy to navigate.
It is, it's not. And that's why I say it's okay to enlist help. I didn't acquire all of this information overnight for my own children. I had a head start. I was helping other people's children first. So, and even then, I bring support to a meeting. I work with an educational advocate because I can't possibly know it all. And I explain that to the school too. I appreciate you running the school and working with the kids and doing everything you do all day. I've brought an advocate to make sure that we're all aware of the special education law and the school law that applies.
Yeah, that's so much. Yeah.
Yes. So somebody's mentioning about the in-home training. And that's an option, and that's right. That's a great resource that can be utilized, that can be provided. So the special education team can provide a teacher, a trainer to come to the house and help with life skills. So it's something that we can ask about in an ARD meeting. If you have a child on the autism spectrum, it is one of the things that's considered as part of the the autism supplement. And I always like to slow school districts down when they go over the autism supplement. Sometimes it's very fast, like, oh, there's 11 things we need to talk about because he or she has autism. And, it's unscheduled or unstructured time. Okay, we've got that in-home training. We don't really have a need for that. And they can go through it kind of quickly. And it's, it can be awkward to interrupt and say, wait, can we just slow that down? Because I'm sorry, but what child couldn't benefit from in-home training? So right, even your typical ones. So it's important to talk about all of those things. And again, that's kind of where your advocate can slow the meeting down for you, because I feel like if they're talking fast, it's a time to talk fast. I'm not always good at remembering, wait, we have things to think about here.
Yeah. Mid has a question specific to the son's placement. I'm not sure if you want to unmute yourself, or do you want to type the question out?
Yes. Hi. Thank you for all of this information. It is wonderful. I've been in the special education game for 3 years now, and I'm still, oh my gosh, there's still so much stuff to learn. So currently, my son is lucky enough to get placement in a full inclusion school. It's a public school in HISD. They don't have self-contained classes. So we love it. Everyone's very supportive. Unfortunately, he hates it. He refuses to participate. When COVID did a number on that situation because of the online school, and he hasn't been in school for an entire year. So every time we just drive by that school, he's in a massive breakdown, like inconsolable crying. I can't even take him there just to pick up supplies because he's just miserable. So I guess my question is, like, I'm not really sure where to best place him. I mean, do I continue to chug along in this school when he's miserable? Do I homeschool him for a year or so? We were in ABA, but COVID. So they didn't want to work with us online. So we had to stop that. He does fine at home. And I've been helping with all his school stuff, and so he's not massively behind, but I
But he
mean,
doesn't want to go back into the building. Is that what I'm hearing?
yes, and also my struggle with the school is they can't, when he's there, he refuses to participate. Like, he will not answer questions. They can't do just regular school, I don't know,
Mhm.
testing on him, just ask him. He loves letters, he loves numbers, and he won't answer questions with them. Like, they can't they can't really do anything with him.
Yeah.
He's not a behavior problem per se. Like, he's not disruptive in class. He'll sit there, but I think he's sitting there to wait for someone to come get him out of that situation. So I guess
Yeah. Is
if they
he
can't,
anxious, do you think, in that setting?
yes, I think he is very anxious. He started there at 3 right after ECI, so it might have been because he considers it as a place where he leaves everything he's known, right?
Mhm.
Like, we've been
And
there,
how old is he now?
he's 6. Well, he's about to be 6, and we've been there for 3 years. They know him, they know us. And you're right about having relationships. We have good relationships. We had problems um, with the district, and the principal stepped in and really helped us out. But he just does
Yeah.
not want to participate. And I honestly, I'm not a teacher. I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with him in this situation. If he's not going to participate, then right, like, what's
Yeah.
the point?
So clinically, what it sounds like, you have a kiddo who's happier and more open at home, and he's having trouble returning to the school building, as so many children are going to after COVID. I think you're not alone. You may be experiencing it on the front end. So there's a couple of things we want to do. One is to deal with the anxiety, and we want to, I mean, that's real. So we don't want to throw him into the deep end and create a situation where it's almost traumatic. But at the same time, we don't want to let him avoid it altogether, because we would be then reinforcing that anxiety, and it may become, well, let's keep him home for a year, may turn into, he has trouble returning to school ever. It could expand into, in some cases, people have trouble going into grocery stores or leaving their home altogether. So we want to be sure that we're being sensitive to the anxiety, but also not letting it rule or run his life. So I would advise you to work with the ABA therapist, to give them a call. This sounds like something that would respond well to behavioral treatment, but also to call and start talking to the school now, show them what happens. So take video, put him in the car, take him by the school, send video, and say, this is what we're up against. What do we do? They need to call in the licensed specialist in school psychology or the autism specialist in your district to help transition him back to school. And so it may even involve, like, getting in the car every day and driving near the school. Maybe you don't pass the school for the first week. Then when he can tolerate that, you might get closer to the school. And these are very, very slow steps. So it might be that you go do something really fun and you need to pass the school to get there. So it's sort of like you're going to reward that difficult time. Use all the strategies that work well with him. I don't know him, but if he likes schedules, if he likes routines, if he likes stickers, he can get stickers for driving by the school. Put it on his schedule, show him it's going to happen and show him it's going to end. Make a really big deal out of how he did it, you may even need to take pictures or look back at pictures of the school or of the inside of the school. That may be your first thing before you even drive near. But the school staff who know him and have this same, experience and knowledge that I do can help set up like we call it a hierarchy for him to help him slowly and gradually become reacquainted. Because you're right, we don't want to just, force him into that environment where it's so overwhelming, but to give him a transition, a slow transition. And then sometimes, there are people who benefit from management of anxiety in other ways. Definitely read about that, look at that. There are, exercise is beneficial. There's some great mindfulness activities that even children his age can be involved in. And if it really is something that's debilitating and, impacting his education, it, could be time to consider like a therapeutic, like some therapy, if that's appropriate. Or even sometimes families do medication management of those symptoms. So again, without knowing him, it's hard for me to say, here's your exact plan. But I feel like there's lots of different things that could be tried and implemented to help him ease that anxiety and that transition back to school.
So Mid, was he, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. I would say, Mid, I think we're going to hear more and more families dealing with this same struggle as people are returning to in-person education.
So Mid, he was fine before COVID and now?
No, he was never fine.
Oh, so even since 3 years old, he never liked it.
Yes, he never.
Is he able to tell you why?
He has limited verbal struggles. So no, he can't tell me why, but I'm assuming that knowing him, he has a very strong emotional memory. So like I tried to emphasize when he started that it would be important for him to make the first day seem really fun. And they did their best. He loved Little Einstein, and they created all of his educational materials in Little Einstein. They created little Einstein people for him. And that first day, it was so bad, he vomited. Like he was crying so much, he vomited. We kept chugging along. The second day, that first week, it was so bad. I think at the end of the week, he just fell asleep in class from like crying so much. And then, we continue, we're continuing, and then COVID hit, and now he's older, and like he's just telling us he knows the way, and he'll tell us if we pass by anywhere that's just even near the school. He's telling us in the car, no one school, no one to go to school. And the principal, even when he moved up a grade level, the assistant that works with him, she moved her up with him. Just
that is a great school.
Yeah. And Mid, you're doing the hard thing too of helping him kind of continue to face it, when the easy thing would be just to bring him home and never take him back again.
Yes.
My concern is, I always tell families, whenever you do an accommodation or whenever you do something for a student or a child, I just want you to have the thought, what does this look like in 20 years?
Exactly.
Okay, so we want to just go there with it. It doesn't mean we don't do the thing the child needs. It just means we need to have a plan for fading it out. So what's happened is now he's gotten all this time away from school because of COVID, right? And so we see COVID helped kind of reinforce he doesn't like school. So now he hasn't had to go to school. So you're in a harder position than you were in. And again, talk to that school. It sounds like they can be very helpful. The words that may help to use are school refusal. So lots of different children deal with school refusal, lots of children. It is not specific to autism or to, even a disability condition. So it often goes with high anxiety. But the good news is, schools have seen it before and they've dealt with it before. So ask them about bringing in the LSSP because of his extreme school refusal that's gotten worse because of COVID. And let's see if we can make a plan for him. I'd also want to make sure he has an occupational therapy evaluation from the school.
He is
That may
on
take
occupational therapy right now.
Good.
And she's,
And is that through the school?
yes, through the school.
Okay, great.
And she's awesome. And
Good,
she's
because
like,
sometimes there's sensory elements of the environment that could make him very uncomfortable. And so even by alleviating some of those, so I would say, let's call an ARD meeting, even if he's in online education, and school may not want to call in an ARD, but call all of those important people into place and start making that plan, because you're right, if he has to go back, this, for example, could be a great use of ESY. Maybe he doesn't make it into the building, but maybe we use the summer to work on getting him closer and closer. So good ideas, reach out to us offline as well if it's something you need to keep troubleshooting.
awesome. One more, I'm sorry.
Yes.
One more. So like what I noticed also academically, he seems to do better, or he shows his better academic acclimation at home as opposed to in school. Like I remembered prior to COVID, our last ARD, they were seeing someone completely different versus what the therapists see outside of that school, and me as well.
Yeah.
Like they're saying,
yes. And this can be common, especially in students on the autism spectrum. This can be common. I kind of call it compartmentalization. So it's not uncommon for me to hear things like, a child's toilet trained at home or at school, but not at home. Or a child drinks from a cup at school, but not at home. Or vice versa. They talk and read at home, but not at school. So this is where that home-school connection is really important. Videotape. And we want to show video to the school. Look at what he's doing at home. How do we get this in the school? So, and it's okay, what you're describing, that your child's more comfortable at home and shows you more, that follows typical development, right? Children first do things with their primary caregiver, then sort of with family members, then like close adults. School and peers come down the line. So he's just showing you where his comfort is. It's very typical. And we're at that critical kind of age and point where we want to nurture him and be sensitive to that anxiety and his level of comfort, but we don't want to create a situation where we reinforce the anxiety to the point that he's, limited in the bigger picture.
awesome.
So just keep that communication with the school. Yeah, good job with him.
Sounds like you're doing great, Mom. So we do one last question in the chat. It says, if we decide to homeschool our son, is there resources for finding teachers and social opportunities?
Good question. So, you all know your children best. Homeschooling is a big undertaking. It is, it's a really big undertaking to be a teacher of one subject. It's a really big undertaking to be a parent, and it's an even bigger undertaking to be a teacher of all subjects and a parent. So, I always tell families, make sure that you have the time and the resources to make that work. Because especially in the developmental period, it can be hard to catch up. Kids do a lot at school. There's a lot of planning and a lot that goes into it. There's also a lot of social opportunities that are available at school. And even though not all children are actively taking advantage of the social opportunities, they're hearing the language. they're with the group of peers, they're exposed to things that they wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. So there really is great value in that for the development of children, of all children. And it's going to be very difficult for us to replicate that at home. I'm certainly not against homeschool, but there's just a lot to think about. What are all the ways my child might be benefiting at school beyond academics? And how do I make sure I can provide that? So there are some great homeschool groups and organizations. I don't know about, disability specific, but maybe that isn't important or needed. There are also kind of virtual programs that have become a little bit more popular because of COVID. So like K-12 is free virtual education. It's a public charter school, essentially, that allows your child to do school online. Children, in order to do kind of an online or homeschool, may need to be more self-directed than others. So that's, something to think about. Your child may need you kind of one-on-one for the duration of the day. And if that's the case, what's your plan for fading out so that they can gradually take more responsibility? So there's so much that just goes into it. All good things to consider. There are some teaching groups and pods because of COVID that have been happening where you can get a certified teacher to come over and do some of that work. So something to explore online and different, homeschool groups. Just remember too, that when we're talking about a child with a disability, in the same way that the public school would have an individualized education plan, we need to keep that in mind for our young person, our student with a disability, because it's not just academics. And I know, Judy and I could talk to you for hours on this, that even if a child has all of the academic skills and they are beautiful, if they can't get themselves out of bed, get dressed, arrive on time, figure out what to do when they're out of toothpaste, if they can't do those things, it's kind of becomes a moot point as to how do we get to the greater independence and the employment. So remember those 3 goals of special education. We have to balance all of those things, higher education, independent living, and employment. So we can't let one of them get too important at the cost of the others. So, definitely keep that in mind. And, the public school provides opportunities. We heard from a parent today whose son has graduated high school and has a vocational program. Is it ideal? Is it perfect? No, but it's there. It exists. And it's very hard for us to replicate those things in isolation when the school system has some funding and some support and some, staff to implement that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and all your questions. I think
Yes.
it's already 11:34. So if you have any more questions for Dr. Montfort, feel free to email her. She has an email listed in the chat box. Judy has also posted it. If you could fill that up to share with us about whether this was beneficial for you, that will be really helpful for us. I'm just gonna take the share screen for a quick moment. Sorry, Dr. Montfort.
Sure. There you go.
We will be having the final talk of our series in 2 weeks. So this will be with Jennifer Chang. She's an attorney. If for last week's panel discussion 2 weeks ago, she was there sharing, and so she will be sharing more about the guardianships, special needs trust. And so if you're interested, the link is below there to register. Feel free to register for it. And I believe Judy will also be sending emails to people for it. So that is that. I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. Thank you, Dr. Montfort, for sharing your expertise with us. It's always so great to hear from you and also to learn from the parents about their needs. And hopefully this has been beneficial for everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank-
Bye.
Emily, Hazel, if you want to stay on for just a minute.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye, Judy.
Bye, Abe.
Bye.